Welcome to the chapel and Arab Media on the Rise. My name is Ruth Berry and I live in Germany and I'm an Australian and I yodel. And I really wanted to do this panel because we are because of current events, but also to find out exactly what is happening in the Middle East with television networks and what opportunities there may be there. So today we have three panelists who will explain this to us. So we're going to start off with who these people are and what their networks are about, and then we're going to go on to the history of why actually Arab media has been on the rise. And then we're going to touch on current events, and then we're going to wrap up with co-production opportunities and... What? Was that me?
Sound effects.
That was the sound effects. Okay, so first of all, I would like to introduce Mohammed Said and Sued. Okay, so excuse my pronunciation. From Al Arabiya?
Yes.
Or Al
Arabiya.
Al Arabiya.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay. So I would like you to just tell us who you are, what your job is, and what is your network all about, and where are you based? So give us a bit of a rundown.
Okay. Yes, my name is Mohammed Said. I represent Al Arabiya channel. I'm now the documentary manager of the channel. We are restructuring the new department because in recent years we used to cooperate with a sister company called O3 Productions to acquire and produce films for Al Arabiya. But early this year we decided to split with O3 and we are managing our own production and our own acquisition. So usually before the recurring events in the Arab world, we had a plan to acquire 123 hours of documentaries and to produce 6 quality films. With the Tunisian revolution, our programming and our grid was affected badly. And with the second revolution, we gave space to breaking news. And with Libya and Syria now and Yemen, all the grid is open to breaking news only.
Before we go on to that side of things, Can we just see have you got a clip of the sort of programming on your
Yes,
network?
I have
and where are you based?
Yes, the TV is based in Dubai.
Dubai,
yeah. And it had it's addressed to all speaking Arab countries and Arab communities worldwide.
And how many? What would be your viewers? How many?
I don't have the right number, but it's some 35 millions.
35 million over about how many countries?
You have the MENA countries mainly, and you have also the Arab communities in Australia, America, and Europe also.
Okay, okay. So let's have a look at a clip of...
This is a clip, this is a sample of a co-production with an American company we made in Iraq just a couple of years after the American occupation of Iraq.
Okay, so this is the sort of programming you're showing on your network. Yes. Okay, let's have a look. Oh, there it is.
شو؟ برن شو مشكلة تمام بجاوب هيكون منزوع خطه مسجين مسج الو عدي انا باسم انا والشباب صرنا هون بالعراق بالشمال شي محل شوفك بلكي بجرب ببغداد بعد كم يوم ما بعرف ليه ما عم بجاوب وينك anyway اذا سمعت هيدا المسج رح ارجع اجرب احكيك بعدين يلا سلام هوك إذا نوصل عند هوك قبل ما تعتم يلا
نبدأ بنحو من العناوين القوات الأمريكية تلقي القبض على ابنة المسجون وإحدى زوجاته في سامراء. مجلس الحكم يطالب المجلس الأمني بإصدار قرار يحدد مدة الولايات المهمة السلطة والشعب العراقي. الولايات المتحدة
Here I am in Iraq for the first time in my life. For 28 years I've heard about Iraq, about Baghdad, the city of cities. My friend, I'm scared of what I might see, of a shock that will bring me back to where I came from. I'm terrified, I feel so estranged. Although I'm in a place I always thought of as my own, since I'm an Arab. These cities are still unknown, wrapped up in a mysterious haze. Pictures are still blurred. I didn't sleep for a split second that night. I sat there watching windows. The light behind them makes you feel warm. Maybe because when you look at them, you realize you're no longer alone in this cold, long night. I wonder who lives on top of these
just
mountains.
stop there for a minute. So
This place is where you...
this is a documentary
Yes.
on your network, but
Yeah.
your network is what, a commercial network? Is it a, like, I mean, what?
It's a news channel. Like usually, news channel they try to show their not only that to demonstrate that producing documentaries or acquiring documentaries it's not their task or not their duty, but we try to create some slots that.
And what sort of slots? Just like what time do you show your documentaries? How many a year do you?
Before the current events, we used to have 2 prime time slots and 3 slots in the afternoon. But now we are reduced to only 1 slot per week and at a bedtime also, at 14 GMT.
1
Yeah.
o'clock.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So that will probably. I mean that. So that's all because of current events
Yes.
and
Yes.
everything
Yes.
running
But,
news
yeah,
all the time.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay. So look, we're going to move on and introduce our other 2 guests here, and then come back and talk
Yes.
a little bit more about that, because this was a very. I was sort of edgy, waiting for something to happen there. So.
No.
it
No,
looks
we
like a
try
great
to have some artistic value and personal approach to
Yeah.
to the content
Yeah.
and to distinguish ourselves from the news line,
Yeah.
you know, and to make and to produce films that can be sustainable with time and they have longevity in time also.
Good. Okay. Thanks, Mohammed. Now I'm going to introduce Paul Edel from Al Jazeera, but your Al Jazeera English, we did because of the current events. It was actually very difficult to get everyone together because everyone's so busy, but Paul kindly last minute has come from Doha, and there are two networks. There's the Al Jazeera network for the Middle East, am I right? And then there's also Al Jazeera English, which is international. So first of all, just clarify the Al Jazeeras of the world and tell us your role.
I'm the Director of Programmes of the English channel of Al Jazeera, which means I'm responsible for all of the discussion programmes and documentary output. It's about, in terms of hours, we're about 2/3 news and 1/3 programmes. And we're part of a network which actually has several languages about to launch. The Arabic channel launched in 1996. The English channel launched in 2006, and we then launched a documentary channel in the Arabic language, and we're about to launch a Turkish channel, a Balkans channel, and we hope next a Swahili channel in East Africa. So we're a wide-ranging network. Within the network, we also have a cluster of sports channels, more than 20 sports channels. We're one of the biggest sports providers in the Middle East, and more channels are planned.
Wow! So it's like Discovery out of the Middle East.
It is. It's everything that you can imagine that's factual. Although there's no reason why we wouldn't do an Al Jazeera movie channel. It wouldn't be perhaps Hollywood movies, it would be movies with, with a heart and a soul and a purpose.
Is there a difference? Is there a difference between your programming for international English and the Al Jazeera network? I mean, who owns Al Jazeera? And I should have asked this about yours, but I'll come back to that. Who owns Al Jazeera?
Al Jazeera is a private non-profit organisation, and it's funded by the Emir of Qatar.
Okay. And so the programming coming out of Doha then for the people of the Middle East, what countries is that shown in? Do you know? I mean, I know that's not your network, but yeah.
It's much the same footprint as Al Arabiya.
So
we cover the whole. We are direct competitors. We are the two leading news channels, news and factual channels in the Middle East. But the networks are rather different because Al Arabiya is part of the NBC group, which is much more like Sky in the UK. It has entertainment channels. The main channel is much like Sky One in terms of content. We are purely factual. So as I say, we have news in Arabic and English, and documentary and sports. But we both cover from Morocco through to Iraq and down into Africa.
When and why was the decision made to actually go international and go English? And so how did that evolve?
The English, I think, grew out of the success of the Arabic. Would you like me to talk about the history of the Arabic a little bit, or
just
are we not ready
no,
yet?
it's okay. I just want to. I'm trying to understand how it all works. So just explain how.
Because Al Jazeera Arabic was a revolution in media in the Arab world. It's a story of ultimately technology defeating dictatorship, of free media empowering millions of people to take charge of their futures. You can't imagine how awful Arab television was in the 1980s before satellite television came along. When I went to live in Bahrain in 1980, we had one Bahraini channel, I think 2 Saudi channels, and the news consisted of pictures of the king or the emir descending the steps of an aircraft or sitting behind a table loaded with flowers. The technology arrived in the late 80s of satellite television, but the real impetus to the start of all these channels was the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait in 1990, when the state-controlled media of the region couldn't even bring themselves to say what had happened. For 2 or 3 days, at least media in the Gulf referred only to the regrettable events in the Gulf. This was really the impetus in a number of different countries to say this has got to stop. We have to have some kind of media that actually covers the news. And funnily enough, the people who were first out of the gate were Egyptian state television at the end of 1990. Egyptian radio had always been the pan-Arab radio. They rather lost that position, but they tried to regain it with a satellite channel. NBC launched in London in 1991 and did have I think a 9 p.m. news bulletin that was very important. Dubai Television launched. BBC launched an Arabic channel in conjunction with a Saudi partner. And this was already the start of a revolution. But all these channels were still quite tightly controlled. Jazeera came about in 1995 when Adnan Sharif, one of the presenters on BBC Arabic, he'd worked in Qatar for a number of years, and he was in Qatar on holiday when the current emir ousted his father and took over the country with a desire to move it forward. And Adnan was sent to go and interview him, and for BBC Arabic. And in the course of the interview, an idea was born. Why couldn't we do something like this in Qatar? Why do we Arabs have to wait for BBC in London to tell us what's going on in our world? So Adnan started the channel, started recruiting in 1995. As it happens, BBC's joint venture with the Saudi company collapsed over the Saudi objections to showing of a panorama program on Saudi human rights. So a lot of highly talented staff suddenly became available. So starting in the summer of 1996, in 3 or 4 months, actually my colleague who runs our director of news in English, was the first editor, the first news editor. Within 3 months they put together a program, went on air in November 2006. And it was the first really free news medium in the Arab world, and it covered the whole region. After years and years of talking about Arab unity and getting nowhere, it created a single media space where people for the first time shared experience of what was going on in their region, largely uncensored. We had Israeli commentators and interviewees on, which was revolutionary at a time when state media referred to Israel only as the Zionist entity. And it pushed out from there. There was an investment in putting people on the ground. The really critical decision, you can tell I had a good long chat with Salah before I came, because he was the man driving all of this. They thought, where should we put resources? And they thought in 1997 they put an SNG into Kabul. At the time, CNN and other Western agencies had permission to be in Kabul from the Taliban, but they didn't really see a story there, and they pulled out at the end of 97. But we invested, we had the SNG, and once Afghanistan started to become a big story, which it certainly did once Osama bin Laden bombed the US embassies in East Africa, we were there and we were live and we had correspondents on the ground. And from then on, when the war happened after 9/11, when America attacked Afghanistan, we were there on the ground. We were the only people there on the ground on the Kabul side. So in a few short years, Al Jazeera took the region from a world of men in suits sitting behind tables of flowers to really free, independent reporting. And it's been a revolution in Arab media. Rob, would you like to roll the first clip? I'll give you a flavour of the Arabic channel as it is today.
No, this is from...
No, that's Mohammed's. It's the Digi. Ours is not laid back.
الشعب التونسي ما يموتش، الشعب التونسي العظيم، تحيا تونس الحر، المجد الشهداء، الحرية للتوانسة، بن عمير عرب، بن عمير عرب، بن عمير عرب.
قرر الرئيس محمد حسني مبارك تخليه عن منصب رئيس الجمهورية
دفع مئات الآلاف إلى الشوارع في القاهرة.
انتصرنا ما تعيشوش 30 سنة.
لأن منطق الثورات كان دائما يقول إن الشعب أقوى من حاكمه
أذكر الجزيرة وأذكر تونس، مفيش صمت تاني، مفيش خوف تاني.
That's just a flavour of the Arabic today. They made 5 minutes. We cut it down slightly for your benefit. You can see why, with a success like that, we wanted to launch an English service, which happened in 2006. It's taken 5 years, I think, to mature, but this year it's really, again, with the Arab revolutions, we have been on the ground when the 20th century international media were not. So Rob, would you like to roll the second clip, which is, this is the English. Again, it's just a flavour.
Al Jazeera is journalism without frontiers, providing a voice for the voiceless.
The world is still trying to understand exactly what the revolution here in Tunisia really represents.
The hundreds of people walking to the streets, it's unprecedented.
Reporting direct from the heart of the action.
We are being told that this tsunami is very real, it is coming our way.
Be informed, be inspired. Al Jazeera.
I just think, so you don't think it's all revolution and trumpets in major keys. Rob, play the third clip, which is our documentary channel. This is in Arabic and reaches across the Middle East, but it's probably the first of what we might call our planned cluster of edutainment channels.
every step, every moment captured
always on Al Jazeera documentary.
Thanks. So there we are. Al Jazeera, I would say, is public service broadcasting for the 21st century.
Okay, I gave you a little bit more time there because you had to
I
had to actually
wasn't gonna
cover
stop.
you had to cover actually a couple of different networks because it's important to know that it's not just Al Jazeera English, but there's the other side. Now I'm going to introduce Mark Kozaki, who's come from Washington, and Mark used to work at Discovery for many years, and now he's working at Al Arabiya. I guess I forgot to say that Al Jazeera means
Means the peninsula. It's Al Jazeera Al Arabiya, the Arabian Peninsula.
Okay.
In fact, it's a very common name of companies in Qatar. You know, launderies and takeaways and things. But
Al Jazeera.
yes, Al Jazeera. It's quite a common
And
name
obviously,
in the Gulf, but the brand is written above that.
And obviously,
it may have two meanings. The first is Arabiya is adjective. It's the Arab channel, channel, or the Arabia.
The Arabia.
The historical meaning of the word.
And now Al Arabiya.
Al Arabiya means the free one.
The free one. And so, Mark, can we hear a little bit about your network? Because you're based in, you're in Doha, Dubai, and also England, and now you're in Washington and also.
And we have bureaus throughout the Middle East, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about your network. Okay. And who are you in this network?
Okay. And thank you. It's a pleasure to be on the panel and to have the opportunity to meet with you this morning also. Al Arabiya is a 24-hour, 24/7 news, Arabic language news and information network, satellite delivered to the same geographic footprint. We cover 21 countries in the Middle East and North Africa. There are actually two feeds, the Pan-Arab feed of Al Arabiya, and there is an Al Arabiya Iraq channel, which is available throughout the entire region, but the main difference is that on Al Arabiya Iraq, there are more Iraq-centric, Iraq-specific programs. The programming consists of live newscasts, about 6 hours a day. There are also a considerable number of daily and weekly public affairs programs, political talk shows, business and economics programs, science, technology, sports, feature magazine programs that are internally produced, and acquisitions of documentary, factual, nonfiction content. My main responsibility as programming officer is for the acquisitions and scheduling, program planning, and business affairs.
Okay, so could you show us a little bit about what... So first of all, why is Al Arabiya, like tell me a little bit about the history of your particular network. Why is it that this is, because you're funded by the US government?
Al Arabiya was launched in February of 2004, so we're just a little bit more than 7 years old. The funding comes from the Broadcasting Board of Governors. Broadcasting Board of Governors is an independent agency that awards an annual grant to Al Arabiya as well as to the various other broadcasting services throughout the world that the U.S. government has, such as Voice of America, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, TV Marti, Radio Marti, etc. And Al Arabiya started when the U.S. government, after 9/11, felt that it would be very important to have a more prominent media presence in the Middle East, North Africa region to share and exchange and present information and ideas focusing on democracy, freedom, diplomacy, etc.
So let's have a look at...
I have a few clips. The first one is approximately 2 minutes long, and this is a little bit of an overview of some of the news coverage focusing on the events of this first half year in the region.
It was the powerful sound of liberation that awakened possibility. Possibility that spread across a region, taking the seeds of a movement and growing it into a Middle East revolution. fight and protests grow, Al Hurra is there to capture it all, proving to be what the domestic press and state TV are not, a trusted source of news for the region. Al Hurra has delivered live, first-hand accounts from the streets of Tunisia, Egypt, Libya, Yemen, Bahrain, Jordan, and Syria. Broadcasting important reaction from the various governments, giving voice to the opposition, and reporting the all-important perspective from the United States. It's the type of free reporting that only Al Hurra can offer.
Libya sits directly between Tunisia and Egypt, two nations that inspire the world, where the people rose up to take control of their own destiny.
The difference is clear, and viewers have responded via email and Facebook with contributions to Al Hurra newscasts and reaction to the coverage. And when Al Hurra was targeted, the satellite signal blocked, the correspondence threatened, Al Hurra's coverage never stopped. Because at Al Hurra, it is not just a broadcast, it's a mission, a promise to bring accurate and objective news and information to the viewers and users across the region.
So are they saying that the others aren't accurate?
No, it is not. No, what it is saying is that Al Hurra presents extensive, fair, objective coverage and provides voices to those who may not necessarily otherwise have that.
Okay, so have you got any more clips of, like, what have you got another clip to show?
I have several. The others are of specific programs. Original production documentaries.
Okay. So what is that used for? Like that particular promo, who would you give that to normally?
Stakeholders.
Okay, yeah. So obviously you have to, sell it in the US to make sure the stakeholders are still, investing in it.
This is to share what Al Hurra is doing, to explain it, right?
Okay, so you're saying this has sort of been built up because America is needing to, tell the American, you're saying the other side of the news and the American view. What other programming do you have? Can you just give us an idea of, like, when you turn on the television in the morning, what sort of programs are you showing? And can you compare it to maybe a network that we might know? No, it wouldn't be the same as
I tell producers and distributors sometimes it's sort of like watching CNN in Arabic. You have X number of hours of live newscasts per day. You have daily and weekly public affairs programs. You have documentaries, some original productions, some acquired. The public affairs program, again, politics, foreign policy issues, business and economics, science and technology, women's issues, social issues, equality. You would see many of those same topics, of course, on the networks represented by colleagues here as well.
Okay. And can you, so just give us an idea of a few titles, for example, of the sorts of things like, so you're acquiring documentaries?
Right. Yes, we acquire several hundred hours per year, 300 to 400 hours perhaps, on an annual basis. We acquire them from some of the smaller independent boutiques, smaller producers, production companies and distributors, and some of the largest, PBS, BBC, A&E, History, Travel Channel, ITV.
So the PBS stuff, which I've seen on your...
Frontlines, Novas,
So
American
basically
Experience.
it's like high quality programming that, is it like how Americans live?
Some of it tells the American story, shares the American experience. There's a genuine curiosity, a fascination with what is life like in America, but a lot of the programming also attempts to show the similarities between the two peoples of the two regions and cultures. Islam in America, for example, would be topics that you would see covered on Al Arabiya on an extensive basis as well.
Do you have to rate? You know, I mean, what have ratings got to do with that? I'm very interested in the concept of ratings in your country.
We do not have daily Nielsen overnight ratings. I lived in a world of the daily report card, 19 years at Discovery, where every morning the mood in the office was either ecstatic or a bit down, depending on how we did the day before. We do not have that. We have surveys that tell us on a weekly basis that we reach 26 million viewers age 15 plus throughout the region.
How many viewers would Discovery US reach?
Discovery US would average in prime time a little bit more than a 1 rating, which would translate to about 1 million. That's on a nightly basis, 1 million plus on a nightly basis.
Okay, so 1 million plus, and you're saying you get 26 million.
Well, the population in the region that we cover is, maybe 300 million or so.
Yeah.
That's approximately the same population in the United States. The United States National Public Radio, NPR, reaches about 26 million. And that's considered quite substantial.
Okay.
We've got about the same number.
And now we're going to move on to why Arab media has risen. We've heard a bit about this, but Mohammed, tell me what what is your history in the media, and how have you seen things change over maybe the last decade? And do you watch Al Arabiya?
I didn't get your question.
Do you watch Al Arabiya?
Yes, I watch Al Arabiya, I watch Al Jazeera, I watch CNN, I watch.
There's one
yes.
viewer.
But
can
you detail your question?
Well, I'll just ask you this first. So when you're watching Al Jazeera and Al Arabiya and Al Arabiya, from a person who's grown up in this region, what do you see as the difference? What's your perspective of the difference of these? And be objective, like you're not working.
I will give you two answers. One as a person working in the media, and one as a viewer.
Okay.
You know? From an in-house site, I think NBC first, because Al Arabiya was born out of the NBC group, you know. And NBC was created on the eve of the second Gulf War, and Al Arabiya was born on the eve of the American invasion of Iraq. You know, so there are two really critical moments in which our group was created. But in my opinion, Al Jazeera and NBC they are indebted mainly to the British apprenticeship, you know, knowing that Al Jazeera group came from the BBC channel, the Arabic channel, and NBC was based in London, and
this is MBC.
NBC, the group of, and it was the first satellite, huge group that led lately to the creation of Al Arabiya in Dubai. They moved to Dubai. But I think they indebted a lot of the British apprenticeship. This is what I call. And to be frank, really, while I watched the coverage of Al Jazeera and Al Arabiya, and I wasn't following on daily basis Al Hurra, but I was disappointed about the way the Arabic eye was present in the event, you know, in the scene of the revolutions. If you take all the footage shot by Al Arabiya and Al Jazeera, you have, I can say there was some laziness in living on day-by-day basis the events. And I noticed that while I was trying to acquire half an hour from PBS and another half hour from ABC Australia. They both produced current affair, one from the frontline episode on the Muslim Brothers in Egypt and their role in the revolution. And the ABC, they were portraying an Egyptian documentary filmmaker amidst the revolution. I was amazed how a foreign correspondent came back to USA and Australia, miles, 1,000 miles away, with pictures we didn't see on our channels. And we are trying to buy this footage. Yeah, okay. And if you look at the current affair magazines produced by either Al Arabiya or Al Jazeera, it's really poor. I'm talking about the documentary sense.
And you talking about I respond to that because I think it's a really interesting point that Mohammed's making. Our Arabic channel, once Tunisia happened, pulled almost all programs. I think they're back to about an hour a day now. There's one doc slot late in the evening. But it's true, we went into full-on rolling news because we felt that if the Arab audience turns Al Jazeera on, it wants to know what is happening now. And we're still doing that. We're still rolling because we've still got Libya and Syria and Yemen. The English channel, we rolled for, 5 weeks? We lost a lot of programs for about 5 weeks. But even within that, we felt that it was really important, bearing in mind we've got a global English-speaking audience, it doesn't actually know even very much about Egypt. And so we worked very hard to keep producing programs that would put these big revolutions into context. Before the protests in Cairo had even got going, we were talking to somebody. We thought we have to get somebody on the ground for long form, and Elizabeth Jones and Caroline Pear had been talking for a while about following the April the 6th movement in Cairo. So we commissioned them right at the beginning. Had the demonstrations even started? Right at the beginning. And we had a film on air the Wednesday before Mubarak fell on the Friday called Seeds of Revolution, and we commissioned Elizabeth to go back twice to make the follow-ups. And in fact, the Muslim Brotherhood film that you bought was the second half of a frontline episode, the front half of which was largely put together from our Seeds of Revolution material. So we did quick turnarounds of the best of the news footage during Egypt. We did 3 half hours. Each was, I suppose, went out a week behind the events, but the idea was simply to pull together this welter of news coverage. It was very simple. It was just news picture and about 4 master interviews with the correspondents who were covering it. We put those out. Once we commissioned fast into each of the revolutions. We had a half hour on Bahrain, Fighting for Change, which John D. McHugh made, lovely film, just when it was all starting to go wrong. And again, we got that out fast. We had
But just going back to what's being said...
I think it's really important that we do put stuff in context, and maybe that's something we didn't do enough of in the Arabic.
And I think mainly because there's some general understanding among the people who produce news in the Arab world that the important is not the quality of the picture you get, but to convey the news itself. I think it's quite wrong. Because even when I witnessed the Israeli invasion of Lebanon, I met really courageous photographers. They were Arabs, Americans, and they have a real sensitive eye.
Yes.
We lost this sensitive eye,
Because you've been.
I think because news has been quality-wise vulgarized a lot, you know, and you have to chase anything that proves the news, not to improve your news.
And this sounds like a very good
and
opportunity for producers to come.
No. They were all. For instance, let's take Egypt. They were all present in Tahrir Square, you know. No one has excuses, you know. The situation in Egypt especially was different from Tunisia at the beginning and from Syria now or anywhere. If you follow the Arab channels, I'm talking about all the Arab channels, they said at the beginning that the brother Muslims they are not present there, they don't have any activities, and they don't have any threat on the future of Egypt. You know, if you look at this front line page, they were present. They have tents, they have agenda also, and they played it cleverly. They didn't raise their voice as a Muslim movement. They insisted on the role of the army, and they were really pragmatic within the context of the revolution. We didn't see such an approach to the brother Muslims in the coverage of the Arab news media. You know, so I think that there's some kind of laziness. And I think the Arab who were not, they suffer from lack of recruitment in their teams. I mean, they should have been reinforced with producers, with foreign correspondents, and with good story editors.
And so did you see Al Hurra?
I didn't see too much Al Hurra. I think, sorry for this, but I think Al Hurra has a problem with the Arab viewership since the beginning. And yes, it has a problem of communication with and it's still connected with the Bush era more than But this is not a personal reason not to watch it, but I was more attracted to Al Jazeera, to Al Arabiya, to CNN, to BBC, to Sky News, to...
So do people actually see Al Hurra, like in your country, would they see Al Hurra as being a channel to get news?
It's not popular. It's not popular. Yeah, this is... And popularity in the Arab world, it's not, I'm not talking about, I don't mean this is a weak channel or a strong channel, no. Popularity in the Arab world, it's really controversial. It's really controversial, and it depends on the daily event you are witnessing, really. In times of revolutions, they are all pro-Jazeera, and in time of peace, they can switch to other channels.
Right.
You know? So this is,
sorry,
yeah,
I didn't.
It's very controversial, the popularity, and having said that, it's really hard to get a clear rating. You know, you need a people meter on second by second basis it's very moving, and you can talk about waves of audiences, not a loyal audience, really.
There's somebody who needs to ask a question back here, and then, so yes, I think it's a good idea to start sort of opening up the floor.
My name is Sylvia Harvey, and I'd like to ask a question of all three speakers, but to make 2 quick points first. In this small country that we're meeting in, the United Kingdom, the government of the United Kingdom has recently decided, forced really, the costs of the BBC World Service to be met by the BBC and not by the Foreign Office. So whereas previously the state paid for the World Service, now the BBC licence fee payers were paying for that service. It has a good side and a bad side. The good side is it's taken out of state funding. The bad side is that it means there'll be less money to spend on making documentaries and so on. So that's the first point, context. Second context point. In Europe, 1848 was our springtime of the peoples. 1848. Now, it took 80 years in the United Kingdom before even half the population had the vote. It's 1928 before women get the vote on equal terms with men. So, the point I want to make before I ask the question is that the process of democratization is slow and complex and difficult. So my question to all three speakers is this. You've quite correctly and wonderfully produced some extraordinary images of the Arab Spring, of the revolutions on the street, a really important historical moment. But what comes next is much more difficult to cover. It's all the silent, quiet, backroom deals that take place that mean that the process of democratization, which I take to mean decisions taken in the interests of the people as a whole, how is that process going to be covered by you and your channels?
This is important. I agree with her. I can answer the second question. I think, yes, we are at the beginning of a hard and difficult process of democratization. And I hope it will be democratization, because so far we don't know how things will develop in Tunis and in Egypt, and later in Libya and Yemen. Will these revolution lead to another dictatorship or another regime that will take off from the left behind? This is a good question. So we have to watch now. And how can we watch as a media outlet? I think we have to wait for... now in Tunisia there will be elections in July, and in Egypt in September also there will be elections. Will the new laws and regulations will lead us to the same imposed pictures on a regime and leaders in the Arab world? I mean, will we see again, instead of Mubarak, another picture of another leader all the time with his sons and daughters and brothers-in-law? Or I think this can be felt strongly when we as journalists and media can see a difference has taken place or not. For instance, for the time being, let me compare between two cases. In Mubarak's times, last year I tried to film a new production in Egypt, and I waited 3 months to get permits, and permits there are really, it's can cause a heart attack to you, really. Because in every street you have to get a permit from the police and from Ministry of Interiors, and you have from the intelligence, and you have from the State Security Department. At the end of the day you say, no, I don't want to film anything. Now we launched a new production on which I gave work entitled The Digital Youth of Egypt. It really went smoothly. So if things keep like this, it will be, I can say we are on the right track, but it will be very hard, because so far the Arab populations have not get rid of the military culture or military sympathy with the person who will save you. Now the new formula is people, army, equal democracy. Is it true? I doubt. I personally doubt. This was the case in Egypt. This was the case in Libya, and in Yemen also, because you have many army officer dissidents. And now in Syria, maybe also the only party that can make a change and stop violence, it's the military also. I hope not. I hope not. I wish to see the revolutions coming to a happy ending, a Hollywood happy ending, like in all times, not in all time. But I really have doubts personally, and I think also with the coming of age, revolution may take few strong people and who don't fear, but democracy requires many people.
Just a note, we're still going along the line here answering that question, so I just want to go to Mark now. If you could just follow on.
From the context of a television program, or context and relevancy. Paul mentioned context before. Context and relevancy in the programs that we develop, that we acquire, that we present, we think are all important. So we will continue with the programs that are devoted to civil rights, social issues, women's rights, equality, providing voices and pictures, and platforms for those who are unheard, targeting young adults, youth and young adults. The future, we think, is certainly the key to success is to effectively reach the young adult viewer. And in all of the programming, we do want to make very, very certain that we are explaining, not necessarily advocating, so that all sides can be heard, allowing a robust debate of issues and philosophies. And we believe that if we are consistent with that, that will contribute to the goals that you're referencing.
And Paul?
We're planning and commissioning with 3 time horizons, and I've been trying to do this since the beginning of the year: short, medium and long. And just at the moment on the Arab uprisings, I'm happy on the short and the long, but not very on the medium. In the short term, we still have several films in production now. I've got 2 films in Libya, behind the scenes with each of the Gaddafi side and the rebels. We have a 1 hour in production on Bahrain, which is going to be very strong. We have half an hour in Syria, which, as you can imagine, is very difficult to make. And our discussion shows are handling this all the time. We have launched a new social media-based show 4 times a week called The Stream, which was conceived before the Arab uprisings. We thought we'd be out on social media finding stories that weren't being talked about in the mainstream, as it turned out, with social media playing such an important role in these revolutions. We have been doing a lot on Egypt and Tunisia and Yemen and Pakistan and elsewhere. In the long term, we've got a big series called The Arabs, A People's History, which again was conceived before the revolutions, but it really plays into them because it's the 300-year history from the Napoleon's invasion of Egypt in 1798 right up to now, and I hope that will give deep, long-term explanation. I'm still struggling in the medium term exactly what to have.
I guess the question's really, what will, I think what you've said, Mohammed, like there is no way to know what is going to happen, but one would hope it would be positive, but who knows? And once again, it may be that media, I guess it's come to a point of critical mass where the media can't be pushed down. The world knows enough, and I guess it's going to sort of go.
But it's going to be years. I think that's the really important point. It is like 1848 to 1928.
Yeah, and not a lot of people do post-revolution films. They all want the revolution, but we don't often do what happened straight after. So there is another.
Well, we've got, for instance, one thing we've commissioned, which I hope will be a different slice on Egypt, is sorry, say too much. It's called The Factory. It's an obs doc in a big industrial setting, because yes, at the political level we're arguing about who's going to be president and who's going to be elected to parliament, But at every level in society, there's a democratization going on. Labor unions are being turned from state-controlled, government-controlled bodies into being, or there's a fight over making them more free. And then there's the way in which all of these changes affect people in their daily lives as workers. So that's an obstacle that I hope would cast some light in a different way on the process, the long-term process of change.
I'm going to go, this person was first here. Michael, did you have a question? You just had your hand up?
Yeah, I did, but I wanted to speak about AJ Street.
Yeah, okay.
So you went ahead.
This gentleman over here.
Thank you. Thanks very much for your presentation. So my name's Pratap Ragani. But my question, sorry, can you hear me all right? My question follows on the question Sylvia's actually. And it's this, since the Arab Spring, can you talk about how taboos in the Arab world are changing? I'm thinking particularly of documentary film rather than news. And I'm thinking, I'm interested to know if you can give examples of the sorts of stories and angles emerging now which are different around what you can say, or examples from what you've commissioned or would like to commission.
I think it's still premature to, but I can give you some examples now from what is happening in the Arab world. Even fiction films and soap operas and TV series that were supposedly produced for the next Ramadan season, they are all subject to updating now. And this means that this Arab world, even on fiction term, not factual term, need to be factual to be more accessible to the audience and to present itself as sellable anytime. This is good for a documentary person because it means with no documentary there's no fiction in the Arab world. So we are witnessing now behind the scenes a process of updating even for fiction films in Egypt and
give some examples of like specifics.
Yeah,
of what
there
you're
are
talking
TV
about.
series and that were produced or half the way of the production during the revolutions, and when the revolution came, they stopped production.
Right.
And in order to resume production, they found it will be better to rewrite some scenes and add others, and so that the production, when it will be broadcast, will be really updated to the recent event.
What about like as a woman?
Yeah.
What's happening? Like, does that mean it's sort of are women driving cars? Do you see people? I mean,
No, not.
just, okay.
No. They are really related to the political issues that the upheavals brought up.
Okay. So that's very much related. So the taboos are related to that are being lifted.
Not all taboos. I mean, everything. We have to wait and see what they have updated, really.
Okay.
And in my opinion, media can only test the waters. What will come next? This can be felt if, let's say, for instance, child labor in Egypt was a taboo to us. We couldn't cover it. We couldn't show a film dealing with child labor in Egypt without having problems with national authorities that can end up by banning the channel from transmitting or having their own bureaus there. I think all Jazeera, Al Arabiya and Harra suffered from such measures. It's still premature we don't have to hope that there will be great expectations, because on political level, yes, there are upheavals, there are promises that will entail human rights, freedom of expression. But what about social taboos? I don't know how much the social reality will be affected positively by
so
what
the
happened.
updates are about current times, and it doesn't necessarily mean that everything's changed overnight and you can show things that you didn't used to be able to show, but you're testing water on things each time to see how far you can push it, I guess.
Now we have, as Al Arabiya, we have for this year we plan to produce 6 hours. I can give you an example. We are producing on Egypt and Tunisia, and we are producing a film on Morocco about the recruitment of young people by Al Qaeda. And we intend to produce also on the Arab revolutions as fueled by the 60-year-old people. You know, and how the old revolutionaries look on to the new revolutionaries. And the common factor between all these productions, except Al-Qaeda issue, is I think the Arab media will give more attention to the young. I think.
More attention
to the young and whether they like it or not, there's a beautiful saying now in Lebanon, I heard. You see, the Iranian let us know better the Twitter, the Egyptians let us know better Facebook, and the Syrians now let us know better YouTube, you know. But this is thanks to the young, you know, to the youth and to.
So can just again, if we can just answer this question very quickly and move on to others, so that we.
Taboos, I think what Mohammed's just ended up saying is really important. I think the place that taboos are being broken is online and social media. I have not seen that come through in documentary pitches. I think there are an awful lot of people who are camped out in Tahrir Square who are still pitching us their I Was There films. I think that these revolutions are themselves the embodiment of a breaking of taboos. The big taboos that have gone are the willingness to speak out and stand up. Before I joined Al Jazeera, I made a film which I was happy to say Jazeera acquired about the Egyptian bloggers, which we made, 2006. And what was extraordinary about those young people was that they would not accept the compromises that their parents' generation of activists made with power. And from the films we've made across the region during these uprisings, I think there's a lot more to tell about that. It's not just about standing up to political power, but I think it is also about standing up to patriarchal social power. It's been extraordinary, the role of women in all sorts of countries. We made a film in Yemen, which was built around a character called Tawakkul, who was a woman activist. Extraordinary scenes, extraordinary to see the sort of Arab dad feeding the kids as Tawakkul comes in and comes in from one political meeting, hugs them all, and rushes out to another.
Is that shown on the
the Arab. They haven't had room for programs, as I say. They pulled most of the programs.
Would that be shown on that?
They would. Yes, they. That could easily. Yes.
Right. So even the
we swap our programs a lot. So I think that the taboos are falling, but I'm not sure the filmmakers have quite got there yet.
And
well, just as a point of clarification, Al Hurra always has and will continue to present programming and reports on some of these topics that we referenced, such as exploitation of child workers or prohibition against women driving cars and so forth. Regarding editorial standards and guidelines, we will remain sensitive to certainly the things pertaining to inappropriate language or nudity and so forth.
Okay. Oh, we have questions. Excellent. I think the person up the back there had their hand up first.
Hi, my name's Pete Fine. I'm an activist with Telecomics. I'm just wondering if you all could speak to some of the challenges and responses of actually getting your content to people on the ground in the areas you cover. I mean, I know during Egypt that Al Jazeera's offices got raided, you got kicked off the Reuters satellite. Even in the States, we're unable to get Al Jazeera English on cable. And so just sort of would like to hear some of the challenges you face and kind of how you guys approach that.
It's absolutely murder. It's been absolute murder. I mean, it's extraordinary. And I'm glad you asked the question because I haven't mentioned it. It has been extremely difficult to produce the news coverage and the programs that we have. We have had to go underground in many places. In Egypt, the security forces, at one point we had to evacuate the news and programs team from one hotel, and a couple of APCs from the Egyptian army managed to get us out because there was a baying mob with machetes. Our correspondent in Alexandria was being hunted down by people who were saying, "Where's the Jazeera correspondent?" The Egyptian regime used every trick it could to knock our signal off, particularly I should have mentioned earlier that we have a channel called Al Jazeera Mubashir, Al Jazeera Direct, which is live coverage. Al Jazeera Mubashir was possibly even more influential than Arabic in Egypt because it was just live all the time. Tunisia, we were hunted. Bahrain, from the beginning, we've been illegal in Bahrain. They tolerated a couple of weeks of the Arabic channel having a correspondent there, but we have a whole session on this tomorrow, but the last set of reports we did out of Bahrain, news packages, were shot by one bloke on a flip cam. I mean, we have to behave now like citizen journalists in order to get under the radar. It's been extraordinarily difficult. Think what we're trying to get a film out of Syria at the moment. I mean, it's just a nightmare.
Al Hurra's satellite signal was jammed, and we have been using another satellite feed to cover that area where the reception might otherwise not be available.
Yes, and our signal was jammed also, and one of the reporters of our sister channel NBC was arrested in Libya and was forced to appear on TV and speak on behalf of the regime, and he was really intimidated. And now, if you look at what is happening in Syria, there's another challenge also because the authorities themselves, they distribute fake YouTube films, and in order to, if you broadcast this footage, they will reply later that you are not reliable. This is a fake footage. So this is
just add, this is a matter of life and death. This is journalism as a matter of life and death. Our Arabic crew outside Benghazi were hunted down and ambushed, and our cameraman Ali Hussein Jabba was shot dead. That's how nasty it is in the field.
Any more questions? Yes.
Hi, my name is Natalie Winters. I acquire documentaries for Dutch public television, and I noticed that programs about what's happening now, and what also, for example, programs on how the Arab world looks back at 9/11 would be very interesting for me to see as well. And I wonder, the films that you commission, especially the documentaries that are made from the region, are they available or interesting for Western viewers? Do you have a distribution outlet? How are your programs offered to the rest of the world? Or are they really focusing on the Arab world and the audience there?
Yes.
And this is, we're talking
yes, about
so your documentaries.
Yeah, they are still in production now, but they will be available for distribution as soon as they are available and finished.
So do you have a distributor, or will you distribute yourself?
We will, we ourselves distribute our films.
Will you go to MIP?
Yes, we go to MIP. We are present in all the events, ITFA, in MIPDoc, Sitges, Spain, Florence.
And you're going to make every year a few very high quality documentaries as opposed to quantity
Yes,
quality,
yes.
not quantity,
Yeah.
and
We aim to meet international standards and.
There you go. You've got sales over there already, and
Yes, we do sell. We're into and our audience is global for the English channel. The other channels are defined for their language areas, as Turkish and Balkans will be, but we are global, and but we're still interested in distributing. We're coming on for 500 hours of original programming this year, of which 120 is commissioned from indies, about 120 again is made fully in-house, and all of that is available for distribution.
And
historically, Al Hurra has looked to buy and not necessarily to sell, but I've been introducing some ideas regarding that internally, even in-flight and on-board opportunities, for example.
I'd like to ask, has anybody else got a question out there before I take up a few minutes more? Because we've got to stop in. Oh, I don't know, is that a person? Are you putting your hand up or just going like that? No, he's not. He was just okay. Okay, WikiLeaks. I did a panel on WikiLeaks yesterday, so tell me, are people leaking to you? Have you set up yourselves so that you can get whistleblowers and you can get secret information? Like, tell us the impact of all of that's been happening.
We have set up.
Closer to.
We have set up a unit to securely take leaked information like WikiLeaks. But you know, a lot of the WikiLeaks revelations have come from people with the protection of American law. And although I think Bradley Manning is probably not happy to spend 20 years in jail, at least his family has not been abducted and tortured. So in a lot of the countries we're most interested in, the risks to whistleblowers are far greater than to people in America or Europe. So it's a delicate and tricky matter. We're still waiting. There are large caches of information that need to come out from Egypt, from Tunisia, from other places where there have been revolutions. We'll see the trial of Mubarak and his sons coming up, only a couple of weeks. There is a huge amount of information still to come out about the years of dictatorship. And I think probably like Eastern Europe, it'll take years before we get it all, or before we get even part of it.
Yeah. We have WikiLeaks. It's not our interest, of course, but
no, it's mainly at Al Jazeera, I guess. I was saying that because I knew that you did have set up a unit. Yes. Yeah.
So, how was your experience with the launch of the Palestine Papers, and then what happened afterwards? What sort of repercussions did you feel as a news organization immediately after the release of the Palestine Papers? The first project of the...
It was a big story. What you're referring to is here we were given, and in fact then we initially had one leak of a cache of papers, of notes taken, minutes taken during Palestinian-Israeli negotiations. And once we got the first lot, we went looking for the next lot in order to build out the picture. And we finally ended up with a cache of documents covering about 10 years of negotiations, which gave the most remarkable picture of the collapse of the Palestinian negotiating position and the concessions that were being offered. We published them we did 5 hours of programs, luckily in the week just before Tunisia blew. So the repercussions in many ways were actually overtaken by the huge news story that took over the world. But yes, Saya Barakat, the chief negotiator, resigned. And we're still seeing now, the Arab revolutions overtook it, I think. So we can't.
My question is more exactly is, did that release bring you additional content, or did it stop the flow? Because it was a pretty serious.
It brought us additional content.
That's what I mean.
We're about to wrap up, but before I do that, I just wanted to ask, will it be easier to get into the pyramids now? You know, for filming. You know, Egypt. I mean, come on, it's so hard to work in Egypt for doing an archaeological film. I mean, it's like what you're saying, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, what's happened to this, to the guy who used to be, you know, he basically was the guy who every time he wanted to go and film, what has happened to him?
He was being investigated, wasn't he, Zahi? But he is
I
the
wanted
world's
to-
great
I think-
survivor. The man
I
with
think
the
this-
Indiana Jones hat.
This is a
he
good.
has survived.
Yeah. This is a good
numerous,
film about this man.
Numerous.
So how can
changes.
just before we wrap up, is it worth pitching projects to you guys?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, all the time.
All the time. How much money? Give us a
It
little
depends.
bit in between Sweden and Germany, or what sort of prices?
It depends, because first of all, I don't want to reveal my budget here.
Of course you don't.
No,
That's okay.
it depends. It depends on.
But you are a
on
worthwhile co-pro
yes,
partner.
yeah. We can co-produce, we can pre-sale, we can pre-buy also, and we can contribute. It depends on each case really.
And
because sometimes people come with they want 10,000 and it's easy. And sometimes people come with $1 million budget. It's very difficult.
But the point is, you are now sort of gearing up again, and so this is very good, and someone who producers can partner with. So this is thank you very much for talking with us. And now, Paul, can we? Do you want all the rights? By the way, when we work with Al Jazeera, do you take all the rights?
We, this year, will commission 120 hours, approximately, from independent producers, mostly quite small producers. And yes, when we fully fund and we take all the rights, but we have a big family of filmmakers working with us now that we've been going 5 years. And actually, I introduced Flora Gregory, who's the editor of our main observational documentary strands, who's sitting at the front here. So Flora is open for business. She's got 52 1 hours and 52 half hours across the year. So in addition to 120 hours commissioned, we have 50 hours of acquisitions and co-pros, and where obviously they're co-productions, so we're sharing rights.
And
at Al Hurra, we acquire hundreds and hundreds of hours of programming. I would be delighted to have conversations with you immediately regarding that. For co-productions and commissions, it is a relatively minimal amount that we have done so far. It's another area that I have been meeting with my colleagues internally about, because I think we can do some wonderful things in commissioning and co-producing, and I anticipate we're going to do a little bit more of that in the very near future.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you to our
Thank you.
panelists. A big round of applause for coming over.